Let's turn to the supply side. Quantity supply is the amount of good that sellers are willing and able to sell. The amount of a good or a service that sellers are willing and able to sell. According to the law of supply, the quantity supply of a good is positively related to the price, holding other things equal. So that means holding other things equal, as the price goes up, sellers are willing to sell more. As the price goes down, sellers are willing and able to sell less. Okay? So typically we have a positively sloped supply curve, okay, as you can see. Okay? So usually we denote the supply curve as cap S. Okay? So when we draw the supply curve, the price of the good or the service is always on the vertical axis, whereas the quantity of the goods or the service is always on the horizontal axis. A lot of times we are not just interested in individuals' demand, but instead we are interested in the market supply. Businesses, firms are particularly interested in the market supply of the goods and the services they sell. Okay? So let's look at a very simple example. We now have 3 firms. Let's assume that there are only 3 sellers in this market: Firm A, Firm B, and Firm C. As you can see, when we pick any price, so let's pick any price arbitrarily, okay? So if you pick $3, for example, okay? At $3, you can see that Firm A is willing and able to sell 10,000. At $3, Firm B is willing and able to sell 30,000. At $3, Firm C is willing and able to sell 25,000. Okay? So how about the market? Okay? So the market supply is simply the horizontal sum of each one of these individual firm supply. Okay? So at $3, okay, so the market is willing and able to sell 10,000 plus 30,000 plus 25,000 at 65,000. Okay, so you do it for every single price level. Okay, so if you're interested, you can do it for $1.75, for example. So you do it for every single price level, then you be able to derive the market supply. Okay, so let's play with the supply curve a little bit. So let's just get familiar with the supply curve. So this represents an increase in supply. It is illustrated by a rightward shift of the supply curve. If you're not sure, you can always do a little bit of experiment. Hold the price constant at any level you want. Okay? You find that at each price level, okay, at the price level, okay, with the rightward shift like this, the quantity supply on the new curve is always larger than the old curve. Okay, so hold the price constant. The quantity supply on the new curve is always larger than the old curve. So that's an increase in supply. Okay. So notation is very important here. So I like to denote this as the old curve as S sub 1. Okay, this is a subscript. Okay, and then the new curve as S sub 2. But you can also denote them as S0, S1, S star, S double star, S prime, S double prime, as long as it's clear to a common audience, common reader, that which comes first. Okay? And then we have a decrease in supply. Okay. So it is illustrated by a leftward shift of the supply curve. Okay. Similar to the demand side, we are very particular about our language here, the wording. Okay, there is a difference between a shift of the entire supply curve versus a movement along the supply curve. Okay, so specifically, there is a difference between a change in quantity supplied and a change in supply. A change in quantity supply is illustrated by a movement along the supply curve, whereas a change in supply is illustrated by a shift of the entire supply curve. Okay, so let's look at that. On the right-hand side, you see a change in quantity supplied as the price. Initially, the price is P1, and then it goes to P2. The quantity, accordingly, increases. So in our language, we call this a change in quantity supply, or specifically an increase in quantity supply. We do not call this an increase in supply. A change in the supply, on the other hand, is not caused by the change in the price. As you can see, if you keep the price constant, we will still see the quantity supply increases. And it applies to every single price level. We call this an increase in supply, a rightward shift. Okay? So that's the difference between a change in the supply and a change in quantity supply. So when you look at the left-hand side here, even though the price doesn't change, I'm not saying that the price doesn't change, but even if the price doesn't change, you can still see that the quantity supplied increases. That means there are other factors other than the price of the good itself that has caused this change. And we call these factors determinants of supply. The list can go much longer than what we have here, but in this course, we will focus on these 5 broad categories of determinants of supply. These are some of the factors that can affect supply. Input prices, technology, specifically technology that affects productivity, and then we have expectations of future prices, the number of sellers, and prices of related goods.